Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and program stream at windowsontheworld.net. And good evening, everybody. Welcome to Windows on the World. We've started doing some live streams on Wednesday, which initially are going out to just YouTube, but will probably go other places as well. And we're using a streaming service, so we're live on video and audio every Wednesday. I'm going to do it every Wednesday now at 8 p.m. So it's going to be in addition to the radio show, which is going out tonight, which often I think will give more in-depth information, and the midweek episodes will kind of expand on that information and go into other areas. I'm going to be bringing you some fascinating ancient history in the forthcoming months. I've been putting all that into place, and do please support us on Patreon. Our film, The Heretics of Smithfield, the London heretics, the ones burnt at the stake in Smithfield, and the whole story and background of what happened there. It's a 1,000-year history in this small area of London. I've done research on it over the past 3 years, and you can find out more about the film, get involved with it even, and also the spin-off projects which will be available to everyone who becomes a patron. And there's a lot of information going to be put on there in the forthcoming weeks. I'm also doing talks as well. And on Saturday, the 18th of January, from 11 a.m. till 7 p.m. in the evening, there's a new media event. And it's free entry. It's at the Salt Cellar, 11A Church Lane, Oldham, OL1, 3AN. And I'll be speaking at 2 p.m. There is an Eventbrite page for that as well, and it's linked to windowsontheworld.net. On Saturday, the 25th of January, myself, Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams are giving people the bigger picture, the new Citizens' Assembly, in fact, at Fairbourne, Gwynedd, North Wales. Freog and Fairbourne Village Hall, Beach Road, Fairbourne, LL38 2EX, and his Eventbrite bookings page at windowsontheworld.net. We're going to be talking all about what is being implemented in places such as Fairbourne, and Fairbourne in particular, because of this managed retreat, which is, of course, as regular listeners to our show will know, a UN global action plan to depopulate coastal areas, forcing people into cities, and rewilding the countryside, also forcing people into cities. And this is a big part of what we talk about. And the actual container for all this is environmentalism, and we do talk about that quite a lot. That container of environmentalism came out of the New Age movement and the combination of environmentalism and development, which is where the banks decided to take over the infrastructure of everything through the United Nations. And we're going to go into tonight a bit of the background of this. We've covered it in quite a lot of detail as to what Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 are, this global action plan, which is all about sustainable development, which sounds great, but actually, well, guess what? It isn't. And we've done so much work on that, and it's a big part of our talks. But I was encouraged to go back in time this week. I had a look on the Findhorn website. Now, Findhorn Foundation was set up in the early 60s, and that led me on to looking at several books which predicted all of what we are seeing now. One was called The Aquarian Conspiracy by Marilyn Ferguson, which came out in 1980, which is very interesting to look at now, along with The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow by Constance Cumby, which also came out in 1980. Now, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow is all about this new age which came in through Madame Blavatsky, Annie Besant and Alice Bailey. And this was all about mentoring people into the idea of a global one world government. And of course, the UN jumped in there pretty quick. And we're going to talk tonight also about the Lucis Trust, which was originally called the Lucifer Trust. And the name was changed in 1924. It was set up by Alice Bailey, who was a New Age channeler, who wrote many books and had a very high opinion of herself and wanted people to follow her works for the foreseeable future. And all of this was mentored into the UN. The UN was on board with Alice Bailey and the Lucis Trust, and the Lucis Trust, previously Lucifer Trust, still has a website which is implementing the UN Global Action Plan, as does this place called Findhorn, which is in a way the sort of Vatican of New Age mentoring. If you go onto their website, you'll find all the usual stuff on there. So I'd just like to thank Gareth Thomas, actually, for reminding me of this book, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. I looked at it years ago, and its relevance was not as important as it is now, because everything in that book has pretty much been carried out. And it goes into this, what people could call a Luciferian agenda. Obviously, the Lucis Trust, it was the Lucifer Trust, so they're not really hiding anything. And it's absolutely fascinating. I've got loads of information for you on that tonight. So it should be a very informative show. But let's look at a book that came out. Yes, these two books. They're basically New Age mentoring devices. Now, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow gives a background for the start of the New Age infiltration of everything, including the Club of Rome, who brought about the idea that global warming would make humanity its own enemy. This came out of the First Global Revolution, which is the early 90s, which followed on from Limits to Growth. I think we talked about that in our midweek show. And the Club of Rome needed a new enemy, so the new enemy was going to be global warming, climate change, and we were all going to pay benefice and pay for our sins for breathing and become a cancer on the earth. And we would worship Mother Gaia, the earth, and there would be no need for any more wars because we are now worshipping the earth, and then we would accept population reduction. This is all part of what the New Age is about. But yes, very interesting stuff. We're also going to look into the Lucis Trust, which was founded by Alice Bailey. Of course, the Lucifer Trust, it changed its name, 1924. Its action plan does mirror that of the UN and is working towards world government, one world currency and a universal credit system. Now, this is fascinating because this is what Alice Bailey actually wanted. Now, Blavatsky, Besant and Bailey were the precursors to what is going on now, to this UN-led global governance initiative, also known as the Sustainable Development Goals and United Nations Agenda 2030, which came out of Agenda 21 at the Rio Earth Summit of 1992. Rio Earth Summit was brought about by a billionaire person called Maurice Strong, who was actually an oil billionaire, along with Edmund Rothschild, who supplied the banking interests. Of course, all this is about the World Bank. So the New Age is basically all about where capitalism meets environmentalism through the World Bank. That's actually the intended outcome of it all. So it's interesting to look at these books 40 years later as they laid out the path for the evolution of what is now the world governance system, all paving the way for a mixture of environmental fakery and capitalist development under a one world super agency, yes, the United Nations under the World Bank. Now, they talked about the new Maitreya. This was meant to be the new Buddha, Christ and Muhammad all rolled into one, and Krishna, of course, can't leave him out. So they wanted this new Maitreya to appear as a world leader. Now, in a way, we don't need a Maitreya now because we have the new Maitreya. The new Maitreya is Mother Earth, Gaia. All is we need are several Maitreyas who are useful idiots to implement it all. And we've got many of those. And the mentoring sites and programs for all of this New Age global governance has grown and grown and grown ever since these books were written. So we're going to have a look at both these books tonight along with the Lucis Trust, and see what their objectives really are and how many of them have been actually carried out. First of all, let's have some quotes. I found this film on the Findhorn Foundation website, and it had every cliche and UN policy repeated by these turkeys voting for Christmas, with ponytails and ponchos and tie-dye. Basically, this is where the need for a new story for humanity came from. So they're talking about humanity needs a new story. Now, this Findhorn was started off in the early 60s, and it was started by 3 people. We'll get into that in a bit, but it was a place where they ended up growing these 40-pound cabbages, and it was meant to have this great energy about it. Well, maybe it did. Might have been picking up a bit of the Gulf Stream too. Very good soil up there. But it turned into this absolute brainwashing hub, which is everything, which is global governance. It's basically the Tavistock Institute of the New Age. The Tavistock Institute was a place which came out of war propaganda to actually mentor people psychologically into the new paradigm of society. It's all about psychology, conditioning. Basically, we're talking here about a centre of the new hive mind. Now, the Findhorn website states that it is an NGO, what a surprise, associated with the United Nations Department of Public Information, holder of the UN Habitat Best Practice designation, and is founder of the Global Eco-Village Network and Holistic Centres Network. Now, UN Habitat is a conference that they have every 2 years, which implements housing policy for cities. So why is a so-called spiritual foundation part of the implementation of housing policy? Well, because it's all part of what they're telling you, Global Eco-Village Network. In other words, the new smart cities are the result of places like this. It says here, the foundation is at the heart of a community of more than 500 people who every day support and live the vision of creating a better world by starting with themselves. In a challenging world where old systems are breaking down and a new story is not yet written, interesting, eh? You are invited to explore who you really are. Well, they're going to tell you who you are because they're going to get you into the hive mind and you lose your mind, the lostness of the mind. Then they can implement what they want, the change you need to be. And where you want to go, it says, in a creative, supportive and welcoming environment. For many people, engaging with life consciously, bringing together mind, body and heart is a transformative experience, often leading to new spiritual insights which are implanted, obviously, by the people in there. The website states it's an experiment in transforming human consciousness, described as a vibrant, international spiritual community. Well, how original. 3 words which now describe global mind control. Vibrant international spiritual community. Yes, that is the new world order. The best way to experience this vibrant international community is to immerse yourself in it, it says. Experience week-long addresses, both the externals of sustainable living, of course, sustainable development, and the heart of sustainability. Their events have the usual ponytailed academics spouting the usual cliches, and of course the ponchoed and big-hatted shamans and indigenous elders. Shamans meaning they should be ashamed of themselves. Now they use this word indigenous, and indigenous in this case could be changed for disingenuous. And it is doubtful their devotees would notice the difference in spelling. That's how brainwashed they all are. There was a film up there. It was from several years ago, and it's all about this new story for humanity. And yes, they've got the ponchoed Mexican spouting rubbish. Where would you get a job like this? It's just incredible. The UN has money to burn, literally, because the World Bank print it, don't they, through the IMF. Well, let's see. The brainwashing starts, guess where? With holding hands in a circle. How original. So, the Findhorn Foundation, it said, we are in trouble right now because we do not have a good story. Now, this is interesting. I'm just going to pose this question. Is the New Age running out of cliches? Well, the people who spout the cliches don't think so, because they draw on very simple vocabulary which uses things like spiritual and consciousness to apply to everything, and then they go on about quantum theory. In other words, nothing's solid and everything's consciousness, nothing's really solid matter at different levels. Yeah, we all know this, but when are they going to run out of ideas Well, actually, they ran out of ideas a long time ago. But it says here, the problem with the old story in Western culture is that it has perpetuated a sense of separation. Oh, here we go. This is where we have to join in with the hive mind. The meetings on their website, the meeting we're talking about here actually, about this need for a new story, is a group of cliche-spouting useful idiots who reiterate the same New Age cliches. Now, they have a lot of people who are into psychology, they have people pushing climate change. It's all the usual brainwashing stuff on the website, so do have a look at it, because you won't be surprised, I can tell you that. The lostness of the mind and the lost hive minds do not have any real philosophical truth here, but they hide behind these cliches and talk about consciousness and spirituality. Their weakness is in lack of real mental clarity and ability, plus reliance on these useless gurus. I'm going to give you some quotes here from Zen Buddhism, because I think this actually throws a different light on the New Ages. In other words, it has some practicality about it. And I've always thought that about these Zen Buddhist quotes. They're about living this so-called spiritual life in a practical way, which I think is far removed from what the New Ages are teaching. This is from Zen Master. I don't know which one, but it's a Zen Master. He said, the most important point is to accept yourself and stand on your own 2 feet. In other words, be independent in your thoughts. And that is something that's completely lacking from this hive-mindedness. Let's have another one. The person who can freely acknowledge that life is full of difficulties can be free, because they are acknowledging the nature of life, that it can't be much else. Now, this is interesting, isn't it? Because when you talk to New Agers, they'll say, no, life's not full of difficulties. It must be your karma. Anything bad that happens is negative, and it must be your karma. So they live in this little unicorn bubble of rainbows. And rainbows are very important in this. Rainbows and unicorns. Unicorns are mythical creatures which are chained according to the royal family and the powers that be, the crown, because the unicorn is the mythical being that has to be chained. And then we have, of course, all the rest of it. We have the difficulties, the lack of ability to really solve problems, because having problems is negative. So, in other words, nothing can actually be achieved through this method of thinking that they're mentoring people into, which is exactly the idea, because they came out with a thing called the lostness of the mind, the fourth world wilderness. This was predicted there'd be the first world, which was Europe. The second world was Russia. The third world's Africa and Asia. And the fourth world is the wilderness, the borderless wilderness of the mind, which we hear from the likes of Gail Bradbrook ingesting psychedelics. This was all part of what was planned. So she's just basically a useful tool of this also. We've discussed that in many shows, I think. Here's another one for you before we get into the New Age hive mind. Calmness of mind does not mean you should stop your activity. Real calmness should be found in activity itself. It is easy to have calmness in inactivity. It is hard to have calmness in activity. But calmness in activity is true calmness. Now, this is a really interesting thing, actually, because this is where sort of you get inspiration. And often when you're doing something, your mind will be freed up to do something else. And this is a different form of meditation. In other words, you can meditate while you're doing something. And the late Robin Gibb talked about this because he was involved in one of these groups. I did an interview with him years ago, and he had quite good insight into this because he's a musician, and he was talking about creativity. He said, look, meditation is not complicated. It's something that creative people do all the time. You're just using different parts of your brain. Very good points, I think. But let's just finish up with the old Zen Buddhism quotes, because I do like them. Zen is not some fancy special art of living. Our teaching is just to live always in reality in its exact sense. In other words, don't hide from anything. To make our effort moment after moment is our way. In an exact sense, the only thing we actually can study in our life is that on which we are working in each moment. Yeah, good stuff. The best way to understand yourself, the best way is to understand yourself, and then you will understand everything. So when you try hard to make your own way, you will help others, and you will be helped by others. Before you make your own way, you cannot help anyone, and no one can help you. Yeah, I quite like a bit of that. I'm not really into philosophy unless it's very good. and I consider those to be pretty good. Let's get on to the Lucis Trust now. The Lucis Trust set up by Alice Bailey and a mentoring program of the United Nations. In fact, it's how the United Nations operates in the New Age movement. We have to remember that Robert Mueller in 1974, who was Under Secretary General of the United Nations, pushed the first Mind, Body and Spirit conference in California and was behind the recruiting of Hindu groups and gurus and these so-called spiritual organizations into the United Nations. Of course, the United Nations wants a one world government, a one world religion. So, well, who'd have thought they'd have joined up with the likes of Alice Bailey? It was a kind of foregone conclusion, really, wasn't it? Because Bailey was really aligned completely with the United Nations. So the Lucis Trust website has a section called the New Group of World Servers. So let's get into this first, and then let's have some quotes from those books, The Aquarian Conspiracy and The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow. So let's get into, the New Group of World Servers from the Lucis Trust website. Let us drop our antagonisms and our antipathies and think in terms of the one family, the one life, the one humanity. Well, that's spawned a million websites. One this, one that, one earth, one world, one vision. You hear this in your local council, don't you? This is where it all came from. The UN and the World Bank. Humanity is not following a haphazard or uncharted course. There is a plan. Now, this is very interesting, isn't it? The New Group of World Servers say there is a plan, and there always has been, since the inception of the Lucis Trust. It's stated as the New World Order, so the plan is stated as the New World Order. Humanity determines the speed of its own evolution and the fulfilling of its own destiny under the plan. The success of the plan depends upon the intelligent cooperation of all men and women of goodwill everywhere in the world. Now, the UN Global Action Plan needs the participation of everybody. They clearly say so. The UN Global Governance Summit said so this year in 2019 and keeps reiterating it, and has reiterated it ever since a document called Our Common Future came out in 1987. And they said the same things as the Lucis Trust. Well, how could that possibly be? Could there be a connection? I think there might be. It says men of goodwill who cooperate form part of the new group of world servers, which is working to implement the plan. Now, does this sound like a brainwashing cult or not? To me, yes, it does rather. Basically, what they're talking about is men of goodwill who cooperate. You're talking about these people like Kofi Annan and these sort of softly spoken, useful idiots who participate in conferences. They are the agents of all this. They're not actually the implementers, but they're the agents of it. The implementers are there and they're all in place. And the people who are behind them have been in place for quite some time too. We're talking about the United Nations here. The leaders, it says here, of the new group of world servers are those who initiate and carry forward activities which benefit humanity as a whole. These leaders are known by their harmless, constructive and inclusive qualities. In other words, wide-eyed, softly spoken, kind of photogenic puppets. These are the ones they use. They provide the vision, it says here, and mould public... they're moulding public opinion, are they? So they change agents too. Of course they are. They provide nothing, these people, but they influence policymakers. That's what's important. They are the facilitators of the illusion, which is implemented on the back of the real and the stated goals. In other words, everything has to be presented in the form of a benefit. Yes, you're going to save the world by being carbon taxed and losing your house, but you're going to feel good about it. That's the benefit. That's the benefice. So, it says here, working in all main fields of human activity and in all countries everywhere in the world, the new group of world servers acts as a synthesizing factor within humanity and lays the foundation for right human relations and ultimate world unity. So basically what we're talking about here is thousands of NGOs all recruiting and implementing these sustainable development goals of the UN. It's actually started with organisations like Amnesty International, and that's what this book was saying, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow by Constance Cumby. It's very interesting looking at this stuff now. You can find it on archive.org, and thanks again for Gareth Thomas for actually pointing that out, because I did look at this book years ago, but then it led me to look into the Aquarian conspiracy, which is actually even more revealing. So let's carry on with this anyway. It says here, the new group of world servers needs a more widespread recognition, cooperation and support in its work for humanity. Every one of us, therefore, can share in the action of the new group of world servers and in the working out of the plan. It then goes on to define the non-world servers as being obedient to authority and defining the world servers as having the self-imposed guidance of their own soul. This is actually the opposite way it works. The obedience to dogma is the New Age, and its guidance is imposed, as in the case of Bailey and Blavatsky, or channeled. This is what they're talking about. All as they did was channel this entity called the Tibetan, and they then took instruction from this so-called higher power, which incidentally wanted a one-world government. So the new group of world servers are not, however, a band of impractical mystics. Well, they're not mystics at all. There's nothing mystical about them. They are not impractical. No, certainly not impractical, because they're implementing a structure of governance all over the world. It says here, they know exactly what they seek to do. They are discovering and bringing together the men and women of goodwill all over the world through NGOs and creating change agents, all of this mentoring into the program, your community leaders, your community organisers, unlimited, we had locality, intentionality, all of these NGOs, and of course the big society. That's where it came in 2010, very clearly into your local council. That's when a lot of this started being implemented very directly. And now, yeah, they're not even hiding it, are they? Yes, through the network of organisations, now NGOs, think tanks especially, and sustainability groups, the New Age conferences, spider's web of interconnecting fake gurus, the new indoctrinees plus the so-called wisdom keepers, the idiots in ponchos and silly hats, and the elders who are even more stupid, who dress in their, indigenous costumes or fancy dress. The network since the 1970s has been growing rapidly. It's massive now. So when these books were written in 1980, they'd been researched during the 70s and to some extent the late 60s. Things were in an initial stage. 40 years later, we can see the results of all this, and we now have the new Maitreya. The new Maitreya we do not need. We do not need it as a person. We do not need it as a god, because we have the new god, Mother Gaia, which was the intention, really. We bypass the need for a leader when we are sacrificing ourselves for Mother Earth. Very, very simple. So that one's worked out quite well. It says here, their united demand is that these people of goodwill should stand together in complete understanding and thus constitute a slowly growing body whose interest is shown on behalf of humanity and not primarily on behalf of their own immediate environment, the common good, the hive mind, the greater good. So the new god is the Gaia religion, and climate change and the media are driving the new apocalypse. Check out The Guardian. That is New Age, hive mind, global governance central, the UK Guardian. So to an extent is the New York Times. It says they can be regarded as the embodiment of the emerging kingdom of God on earth. But it should be remembered that this kingdom is not a Christian kingdom or an earthly government. Now, there's a lot in there, but I think that it would be better if you ponder on that yourself for a minute. I'll just read it out again. These are the people, these servers who they're talking about. They can be regarded as the embodiment of the emerging kingdom of God on earth. Now, remember, their God that they're talking about is Lucifer. This is the Lucis Trust. But it should be remembered that this kingdom is not a Christian kingdom or an earthly government. Well, It is openly Luciferian as set out in the doctrine of Bailey and Blavatsky. This, however, is not as important as the World Bank and the Global Environmental Facility, who lend money to nations, make them buy climate change mitigation tools and windmills and all the rest of it and solar power, and then they realise that it won't power the country, and then they have to pay the money back. And anyone who doesn't comply is destroyed. This happened in Haiti. This has happened in quite a few places actually, but most countries are now brought into line by what happens to them if they don't comply. Remember, there is no place outside of this system. This system means everybody has to be mentored into it. It is absolutely intolerant. It is a grouping, it says here, of those who, belonging as they do to every world religion and every nation and race and type of political party, are free from the spirit of hatred and separativeness, and who seek to see right conditions established on earth through mutual goodwill among all men everywhere in the world. Next section in this is who is going to solve it. This is the new group of world servers. The new group of world servers. So they've got this big problem. How are we going to solve it? Let's see what they say. People in the world at this time can be divided into 4 groups. This is, of course, a wide generalization, and there are many bridging groups intermediate between the 4 major divisions. So, keep it nice and vague and get everyone involved. First, the uninformed masses. These, through poverty, illiteracy, hunger, lack of employment, without leisure or means of cultural advancement, are in an inflamed condition. They are, however, enough developed to respond to the mental suggestion and control of more advanced people. Here we get the social Darwinism. Now get this is what came out of Charles Lyell and Darwin. The New Agers, people like Bailey and Blavatsky, pushed Darwinism. Evolution is central to their theory. This is why they attack creationism and even, of course, intervention theory and any kind of natural evolution or natural kind of system, which is what they attack all the time. In other words, anything creative is left out of it, which is kind of interesting. The idea that we are infinite seems to have boundaries as far as their thinking goes, which is quite interesting. Second, it says here, the middle classes, both higher and lower. These are the people who are going to solve it, remember. These constitute the bulk of any nation. Intelligent, diligent, often narrow-minded, inquiring, essentially religious, they are torn by economic and ideological conflicts, and because they can read and discuss, are beginning to think. They form the most powerful element in any nation. In other words, look at Extinction Rebellion. This is what they're talking about here. These are the group they're talking about. Third, the thinkers everywhere. These are the intellectual, highly educated men and women who sense ideas and can formulate them into ideals. They utilise all the known methods to reach the general public. They stir the middle class to activity and through them arouse the masses. The part they play is of paramount importance. They are steadily influencing world affairs, sometimes for good and sometimes for selfish ends. Well, it's selfish people who are mentored into this programme who like to believe that they're doing good. That's where that's going. So let's have a look now. It says the 4th group, the new group of world servers, the 4th group. These are the people who are building the new world order. They are all of them definitely serving humanity and are, through the power of their response to the spiritual opportunity, tide and note, emerging out of every class, group, church, party, race and nation, and are therefore truly representative. They speak all languages, they embrace all religions, all sciences and all philosophies. Well, there you go, that's the hive mind in one. They're the new group of world servers. Yes, their characteristics are synthesis. Blending of fire and water, the old Rosicrucian thing, synthesis. Or you get thesis, antithesis, and then you get synthesis. So out of the chaotic kind of clash comes the synthesis. Inclusiveness. intellectuality, and fine mental development. They say nothing and write no word which could feed the fires of hatred, and thus tend to separate man from man and nation from nation. They own to no creed save the creed of brotherhood, which, according to Bailey and Blavatsky, is international Freemasonry, or was, based on the one life, the one life. They recognise no authority save that of their own souls. They make no clamour about their own ideas, discoveries and theories. Well, maybe they could take a leaf out of that book. They make no clamour about their own ideas, discoveries and theories. You try telling that to a New Ager. But because they are so inclusive in their outlook and so wide in their interpretation of truth, they see the hand of God in all happenings. Well, that's a big problem, isn't it? Because if the hand of God that they're talking about is Lucifer, then they could be a bit selfish here, couldn't they, really? His imprint upon all forms and his note sounding forth through every channel of communication between the subjective reality and the objective outer form. So in other words, they can inject whatever they want in here. It says, behind this fourfold division of humanity stand those enlightened ones, whose right and privilege, is to watch over human evolution. This is what Bailey and Blavatsky thought they were there for, to watch over human evolution and to guide the destinies of men. Of course, they don't really go into intelligent design, which is what you'd think New Agers would do. I've never heard this from New Agers. They don't talk about intelligent design. Of course, intelligent design generally rejects creationism, which is a total contradiction. So I often get accused of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Well, not very often, but once recently. I was doing a talk when I mentioned Blavatsky and Bailey and the New World Order, and they think somehow there's some good in their teachings. Well, I've never found anything useful in their teachings, really. There's not any great philosophy for me, but I'm talking about what they were used for. Maybe not their original intentions, who knows, but Bailey definitely advocated a one world government, as did Blavatsky later on. So, in the theologies of the East, they are called by many names, these enlightened ones. Well, I would say charlatans. The billionaires and World Bank with frontmen all indoctrinated into the Global Action Plan. It says here they are also known as the agents of God, or the hierarchy of liberated souls who seek ceaselessly to aid and help humanity. This they do through the implanting of ideas in the minds of world thinkers. That's interesting, isn't it? So they seek ceaselessly to aid and help humanity by implanting ideas in the minds of the world thinkers. Sounds like brainwashing to me. So that these ideas in due time receive recognition and eventually become controlling factors in human life. Get that? Controlling factors in human life. So this New Age global governance is all about controlling. It says all true servers everywhere belong to the new group of world servers, whether their line of service is cultural, political, scientific, religious, philosophical, psychological, or financial. They constitute part of the inner group of workers for humanity and of the world mystics, whether they know it or not. We're talking here about your Maurice Strongs, your Edmund de Rothschilds. These are the people who really got it going in 1992. They brought the fire to the water, the fire of banking and development to the water of the environmentalism. So, education was next, of course, with UNESCO, and the New Agers have all been earmarked for service in the UN Global Action Plan, which was the original intention of Blavatsky, Besant and Bailey. They all wanted a world government, a one world monetary system and global governance over national sovereignty. Bailey and Blavatsky even listened to the same entity, this Tibetan, which they both channeled at home. The zeal with which the late Victorian era embraced everything Eastern did mean that they grabbed these bits of Hinduism which fitted in with their worldview. I think that's an important point. The late Victorians were very much into all this, and sometimes in a very good way. They were trying to explore. They were just getting out of the country. The most privileged people were able to travel. So they were going over to India, bringing back these fragments of wisdom. And of course, it gets put into a governance strategy because this is Britain, the centre of it all. Britain was the centre of this global governance strategy, still is through the City of London. So the New Age really, in effect, came out of Britain. It didn't come out of the East. The East already had its philosophies. of which the United Kingdom and the United Nations used. They cherry-picked the bits they needed to get people to fit in with the idea of the hive mind global governance. It's all quite simple, really. So the hive mind was ready to be led by the overlords, the bankers and the billionaires, Maurice Strongs, your Edmund Rothschilds. The power which the new group of world servers, it says here, will eventually wield will be drawn from two sources. First, from that inner centre or subjective world government whose members are responsible for the spread of those ideals and ideas which have led humanity onwards from age to age. So they're talking about this is a thing that's gone through history, and you have these same leaders there all pushing towards the same end, this one world government. The subjective world government, though, is the one implanted in the hive mind of New Age acquiescence. You have to acquiesce, remember. You have to stand in a circle, holding hands. You have to get brainwashed at the Vatican, which is Findhorn in Scotland, the Vatican of the New Age. Yes, it says here, Bailey inadvertently, though, has sublimated her followers into accepting the lostness of the mind. This is plain to see in the New Age from all the bandwagon jumping writers and fake gurus. Go back from Deepak Chopra backwards, go even forwards. There's more of them now, more than ever. Let's carry on with this. This inner centre has always existed, and the great leaders of the race in every field have been connected with it. The great idealists and world workers, such as Christ and his great brother, the Buddha, and those lesser workers, such as Plato, Spinoza, Abraham Lincoln, Florence Nightingale, have all been associated with this centre. Now, can you see what they're doing here? They are actually going all over the place, but they've been very specific in what they're saying and who they're involving in all this. The range of these associates is tremendous, and the grades of these workers are many, but self-sacrificing work for the betterment of human living and love of their fellow men have distinguished them from all. Oh, isn't that lovely? They must be all right then. They can't be horrible, can they? They can't be selfish. They can't be implementing something which is going to take your property and stop you moving around and tax you to death. Or kill you in hospitals. They can't be thinking about things like that, these people, can they? No. But remember what Bailey said, there's no place for anyone outside this system. She did clearly say that. So it is intolerant. We're talking about an intolerant but very inclusive system here. Do you see what I'm getting? See how it comes into your local council now? It says here, the range of these associates is tremendous, and the grades of these workers are many, but self-sacrificing work for the betterment of human living and love of their fellow men distinguish them from all. These great souls are primarily distinguished by the fact they know no mental limitation. Well, I'd like to challenge that, but I don't think they'd be mentally able to allow it. And their inclusiveness is such that for them there are no racial distinction or any religious differences. No, because there can't be, because there's no religion. You're not allowed to have one. The second source from which the new group of world servers will draw its power will be from the men of goodwill in the world at any given time. They will be able to swing into activity at any moment such a weight of thought and such a momentous public opinion that they will eventually be in a position definitely to affect world affairs. So there you go. Your globalist puppets all came through this agenda. Well, all this happened, and the Lucis Trust, Findhorn, and then the thousands of Templar NGOs took the new system around the world and into every decision-making process on the planet. None of this would have been possible without the UN, World Bank, and the billionaires, which have combined the concept of environmentalism and development into the Sustainable Development Goals, the most effective and totalitarian governance system ever. Bigger than communism or any other system, as it absorbs all systems under one system, one hive mind, and one world government. So that's all about the agents of God, the hierarchy of liberated souls, the new group of world servers. These people who are making decisions on your behalf. Let's get now into those two books, give you a bit of insight into what they were saying, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, by Constance Cumby. She talks about the influence of the Club of Rome and, of course, the Lucis Trust, who we've just quoted, the UN and the promotion of psychedelics, which is all now very relevant. The promotion of psychedelics, Extinction Rebellion, the Club of Rome using climate change as the weapon against humanity. So humanity had a common enemy, humanity itself. There were no need for any wars. There's no need now, unless it's a takeover in the Middle East, of course, or a takeover of assets, which will still go on, because remember, this is a global governance system. It's nothing to do with peace. It's to do with the illusion of peace and the illusion that humanity are a stain on planet Earth and the billionaires are going to have it for themselves. That's basically what the New Age and the New World Order is all about. New Age, yes, the Club of Rome, so important there that was quoted and referred to in The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow in 1980. Constance Cumby also talks about David Spangler, who went on to get involved with Findhorn, and he had the Lorien.org. He's still got a website, Lorien Publishing. It's all the usual stuff you'll find on New Ages, of course, intermingled with psychology, mind control, all that sort of stuff. It says the Lorien Press is a for-profit business. Well, it's a very profitable business, the New Age. He's got his star seed, and he has his journey into fire. The journey into fire. Of course, we need the fire on the water, though. Dorothy McLean. Right, now, this is one of the founders of Findhorn, which she's quoted in this book. It's one of the three founders of Findhorn. She communicated with the devic or angelic realms. What could possibly go wrong here? She began recording messages from the God within. She worked for the British Secret Service, did Dorothy McLean. So you've got the intelligence services starting up the New Age hive mind Vatican of, what's it called? Not entitlement, recruitment. So she worked for the British Secret Service during World War II. She received messages from the trees as well. We've all done that, haven't we? And she had a book, Call of the Trees. She's got a lot of things that refer to her communing with nature and nature spirits. So yes, this book, Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, goes in with a lot of biblical quotes, but basically she does actually quote the well-quoted and probably quite relevant Revelations 13, 16 to 17, and he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Now, she also goes into the use of 666 in these books by people like David Spangler. I can't sort of authenticate that because I haven't really looked in depth at his texts. But if anybody knows anything about that, yeah, get in touch. Let's get on now to the Aquarian conspiracy. Now, this is very interesting because this foresaw an awful lot of what was going on. And she talks about how this went into humanistic psychology. It was written by Marilyn Ferguson. Now, the Aquarian conspiracy is in favour of the New Age. It's not about calling it out as a conspiracy. It's saying that it's going to be implemented through a conspiracy. It says personal and social transformation in the 1980s. She was talking about this through humanistic psychology. She called it the movement which has no name. Interesting that, eh? Because a movement with no name infiltrates everywhere. But broadly, it's part of the New Age. It was to create real and lasting change, just like every NGO and change agent facilitating group on the entire planet. So from 1980s onwards, hundreds, thousands of NGOs are controlling the narrative, and they're saying exactly the same thing. The conspiracy, meaning in this context, to breathe together. She describes the Aquarian conspiracy as a conspiracy to breathe together. In other words, we all share the same air, the one hive mind. Here's some quotes from the book. If you want to change bureaucracies, you first have to change bureaucrats. Well, isn't that interesting? Isn't that what's happened at every level, from global governance to local governance? Change agents. You have to change bureaucrats if you want to change. It boasted of widespread infiltration at every level of society. This is what the Aquarian conspiracy was all about. It's about infiltration of every level of society. So basically we're talking about here New Age Archons, leaders, the magistrates, the elders, the useful idiots, the indigenous tribes who are mentored into the UN programme, the indigenous people who have their lands taken off them, but they employ fancy dress party fools to go around talking about connections to Mother Earth, Pachamama and all the usual nonsense, which is nonsense because it doesn't go any further. There is no depth of thought in this new age. There are just cliches left, which I think is why it needs a new story. The new age needs a new story. I wonder what story that could be. Well, if we take away some of their words like inclusive, vibrant, and consciousness, and personal dynamics, self-realization, maybe things could get more interesting. Well, they couldn't be less interesting with all this stuff, really, in my opinion. But yeah, when we're talking about this, we talk about New Age Archons. This is my opinion of it. The rulers are globalist bankers. This is what the New Age global governance is all about. It's not about holding hands in a circle. It's about holding hands in a circle on land which doesn't belong to you, never can belong to you, and paying for the privilege of standing in the circle holding hands. It says here from the Aquarian Conspiracy, mind sciences are part of the New Age movement, human potential, holistic, humanistic psychology. Psychology is most important here. Remember, the Tavistock Institute pushes this stuff relentlessly. Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, which came out of World War II propaganda, studying the effect that war and trauma had on soldiers and how minds can be controlled. They talk about karma, the use of terms that are bigger than Eastern religions, bigger than all religions. They talk about Lucifer, and there's a conversation which was overheard by Constance Cumby, who wrote Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow here. I made a note of it earlier on. And she started challenging this woman. This Constance Cumby was talking about Christianity. And the woman said, the Antichrist is not the negative thing the Bible made him out to be. Isn't that typical New Age? You can't have anything negative. Everything's got positive and negative. I mean, duality just becomes one, The Antichrist is not the negative thing the Bible made him out to be. A New Ager, when exasperated in a conversation with Constance Cumby, said that. The New World Religion, Universal Credit Card. Universal Credit, where did that come from? Well, it came from the New Age, it clearly says so. World Food Authority, of course. These are all agencies of the United Nations. Look at the agencies of the United Nations, including the Universal Postal Union. They own everything that's going on in the courts. They own all of the infrastructure of the postal services. The World Health Authority, World Health Organization, World Water Authority. Look at WaterAid. That's all part of the UN global governance system. Yes, all those thirsty-looking people. Why are they thirsty? Because the aquifers have been diverted. The rivers have been blocked up. Their water has been stolen. But we're going to give it back to you at a price. That's what this is about. Nothing benevolent about it at all. But Blavatsky stated that all world religions had common truths. There's a belief in evolution, the existence of masters. There has to be masters, the Maitreya's, the people who are going to save us. The people who are going to save us, though, are now the bankers. How did that happen? Because that was the plan in the first place. Blavatsky said the Christians and scientists must be made to respect their Indian betters. Can you get your head around this? The wisdom of India, her philosophy and achievements must be made known in Europe and the US, and the English made to respect the natives of India and that more and Tibet more than they did at the time, because obviously they didn't know much about them at the time. It was people like Blavatsky who were revealing this stuff to them through the Theosophical Society. So this is all again from this book, The Hidden Dangers of the Rainbow, and some other quotes. And of course, we've just been talking about the Aquarian Conspiracy, 1980, by Marilyn Ferguson, who I think that's where some of these quotes come from, these Blavatsky ones. Yes, just found that now. Theosophists, yes, they talk about theosophists. Esoteric philosophy reconciles all nations under the influence of the Great White Brotherhood. They were to keep their society secret for 100 years, which they did until 1975. That was what the Theosophists said. Now, this is very interesting because it directly mirrors the earlier Rosicrucians, that Brother R.C. was buried with the rose, holding the rose like Lazarus was going to raise from the dead with the wisdom, with the scroll of the R.C., the Forma Fraternitatis. This is all very similar. It's just a copy of the PR stunt of the 1600s, which was the Rosicrucians. Basically recruiting all the useful minds and finding out what everyone was thinking. Very good surveillance exercise was the Rosicrucians. Who wouldn't want to join a secret society? Who wouldn't want to be tapped on the shoulder one day and say, I'm from the Brotherhood, would you like to join? Well, that'd be flattering, wouldn't it? Blavatsky, Krishnamurti, they fell out apparently. Krishnamurti was a big part of this. Then we had Annie Besant through to Alice Bailey. And of course, let's get back to Findhorn. It was founded in 1962 by Peter and Eileen Caddy, Dorothy McLean, who was the woman who worked for British Secret Services. It was the place to carry out the plan on Earth, the plan. This was the updated place where the plan was going to be carried out. The plan, the New World servers were all going to be trained there. Well, they've got loads of training places now. They've got them for people who work on your local council. Unlimited, check them out. Crown Agents, look at all of these people. Look what they're doing. This is New Age global governance. It's a very big project. It's bigger than communism. Yes, it was the place to carry out the plan was Findhorn. In 1970, David Spangler joined as co-director. This fella from the Lorien Press. Spangler was into UFOs, what a surprise. Maitreya, Rakorsky. Rakorsky's this channeled entity that Bailey, I think, used to speak to. Basically, the light of Lucifer. That was what he said he was into because of this Lucis Trust, the involvement of them all into the same hive mind. So basically, he wrote Birth of a New Age. And it's very interesting that Amnesty International was stated to come out of all this, which is fascinating, really. And the Stanford Research Institute. Now, the Stanford Research Institute do some good work, but of course, broadly, they're going to be mentored into the New Age hive mind. But they have done some good stuff. I've interviewed people who work for Stanford, including William Bullman, who wrote The Secret of the Soul, all about out-of-body experiences. But this is where they get it. They cross over parapsychology into the New Age. So they've stolen parapsychology. Parapsychology is the scientific investigation of the paranormal. They don't want the scientific investigation of the paranormal. They want it to be just channeled information, because channeled information can come from anywhere. And basically, it can be exactly what the UN want it to be, can't it? Out of this came hundreds of organisations like the Global Cooperation Council.org. Basically, they're now implementing the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. Unity in diversity. The New World Order. Yes, unity in diversity was all about experiential religion. You're going to experience religion. You're going to have these experiences that we're going to give you. The Sierra Club, massively involved in the global warming scam. Big influences in the New Age. What they said also was that its centre is everywhere. The New Age, its centre is everywhere. Networking, synergy, silver mind control, all of these things were part of it at the time. The political aim was global control, clearly stated. Marilyn Ferguson said that global communities have enriched the world beyond any possibility of retreat. Now the whole planet is alive with instantaneous links, networks of people poised for communication and cooperation. Yes, that's what I've been talking about for a long time. Basically, this hive of organisations, a spider's web of subversives all over the world working towards one aim. Yes, the global governance. The creation of large global agencies was one of their stated intentions. The stated intention of the Aquarian conspiracy, the creation of large global agencies. Yeah, it doesn't sound very holistic, really, does it? The Trinity, they said, was inferior. The Holy Trinity that the Catholic Church talks about is inferior to Bailey's solar logos, which had its own solar trinity. The seven rays, their god was S. Sanat Kumara. Sanat being an acronym, what they call them, of Satan. Getting a bit tired here. The God, the one initiator. Yes, Sanat Kumara, the eternal youth from planet Venus. That was their god at the time. Obviously, they don't need that anymore. They've got climate change. They've got Mother Gaia. Levels of evolution. They talk about levels of evolution. In other words, this is where it's your karma that you're going through this. You're not evolved enough, This is the sort of nonsense that New Agers come out with. They misunderstand karma, actually. Karma is what you're doing at the present time. It's not necessarily something that is bad or good, but it's been misinterpreted. Yes, I've spoken to the gurus myself many years ago. Didn't find them of much use, though. Promotion of gigantic global agencies controlling all resources. This was one of the aims. The New Age has now run out of cliches. Yes, unity and diversity, hive mind control, uniformity and universality of belief and thought. Susceptibility to hypnotism is a hugely important factor in the New Age. If you are not susceptible to hypnosis, you will start seeing through it very quickly. Now, yes, Unity and Diversity Council sponsored the first Mind, Body and Spirit Festival in California. Take a look at a brilliant documentary by Carol Mayer-Treiska. No relation to the Maitreya, by the way. That's just her name. Carol Mayer-Treiska. And it's called Gods of the New Age. And you can see it on YouTube. Very fascinating to see how the UN got involved in the Mind, Body and Spirit Festival in California. And Findhorn, of course, became the brainwashing hub. You have this group of world servers from the Lucis Trust. May the power of one life pour through the group of all world servers, the light of Lucifer. Population at various degrees of evolutionary development is one of the things they were talking about. So in other words, people like Alice Bailey were very special. She thought a lot of herself. She thought that she was destined to be the voice of thousands, leading people, making contact with world leaders, starting new dimensions of reality on Earth. Yes, she didn't think big. She thought very big, but she thought a lot of herself, more importantly. But basically, I'm going to finish up in a minute, but the dangers of the hidden rainbow, the hidden dangers of the rainbow. Let's get into what the rainbow is, because the rainbow has been used as the LBGT flag, and it's another flag as well. Look up Soviet Autonomous Oblast flag. That's interesting as well. It's very similar. But it says the rainbow signifies no more floods. This is a biblical belief. The rainbow signifies there will be no more floods. A message from God, a covenant that never again would God destroy the earth by flood. There you go. That's your New Age agenda. And we're going to be back on Wednesday, probably talking about some of this actually, because when I dig into this, it just goes everywhere. And that's what's interesting. Hope you found that interesting. I'm back on Wednesday at 8 p.m. on our YouTube Windows on the World channel while it's still there. And on Thursday, I'll be chatting with Eric Von Essex at 7 p.m. on the Eric Von Essex channel. Back here next Sunday. I think people are enjoying the midweek broadcast. We did the first one last week. It's all a bit of a trial, but it seemed to go very well. Thanks for listening, and get in touch with anything you have of interest. Good night from me. Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and program stream at windowsontheworld.net.